welcome to this webinar entitled Driving Employee Engagement Through Sustainable Benefits. My name is Peter Banks. I'm the founder and CEO of the HR Director. We are a strategic publication for HR and people leaders in print, digital, person and online. Delighted today to partner with Electric Car Scheme, a trusted EV salary sacrifice provider for employers. So by way of a brief intro, in the modern workplace, employee expectations around sustainability, well-being and meaningful benefits have evolved. This session explores how forward-thinking organizations are enhancing employee engagement and retention by offering electric car schemes as part of their benefits package. We'll discuss the strategic role of such schemes in supporting environmental values, reducing financial pressures on employees, and aligning with broader ESG goals without placing undue burden on employers. Brief housekeeping, 1 hour for the session. We'll keep it quite tight. Polls, we'll run some polls. We'd like you to take part. A little bit different this time because Teams is having some issues. So we've got the chat function. You'll get a URL to each poll. Click on it. I think the first time you pop your name in, after that it should be fine. And those polls will pop up on a separate web page. So just make your choice and then we'll feed them back into the session in the screen. So please do take part and we'll share the results as we go. Questions, fire questions in. Just make the most of this webinar. So if you've got burning questions, please get them in and I'll ask them to our panel here today. We'll get through as many as we can. Failing that, we'll come back to you afterwards. They won't be wasted. Okay, let's get underway. Joining us today is Natalie Izzard, who is the Head of Partnerships and our partner today, Electric Car Scheme. So good morning, Natalie, and thank you for taking part.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm really excited about today.
You're very welcome. Natalie, right, let's kick off and just let us know a little bit more about you, your role and the organisation, and actually probably, even footprint employee numbers is always useful.
Yeah. So as said, my name's Natalie. I look after the partnerships team here at the Electric Car Scheme and the Charge Scheme, which is kind of a new addition, which is quite a fun one. I have been in the world of employee benefits for kind of 4 or so years now, mainly working across sustainable benefits. So hopefully can give people some good insights to take away from those kind of years of experience. My job mainly involves me collaborating with lots of organisations in employee benefit and reward, working really closely with HR colleagues to make sure that they're getting the benefit package for their employee base that they need, with a big focus on sustainable transport. Our company itself, the Electric Car Scheme, has been around since around 2020. And we were kind of built to create a solution in the salary sacrifice space for originally SMEs who are being a bit underserviced, but increasingly more and more larger corporate businesses as well. Ultimately, their needs are the same as the SMEs, right? Which is they want a trusted partner that can deliver them a car scheme, which is, integrated with what they do already, easy to administer, with really cheap prices for their drivers. And then really excitingly, kind of tail end of last year, we launched the Charge Scheme, which is a kind of a supplementary service, which allows people to salary sacrifice the cost of the energy going into their electric car for company car usage. So 2 really cool products. So that's kind of my background, but we'll talk to lots of other different things today to hopefully give people some things to take away back to their busy days and some ideas for their sustainability benefit strategy as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, Natalie. All right, well, let's get underway. So let's turn to our first question, and I guess this is a good starting point. So, how have employee expectations shifted in terms of benefits? I think especially around sustainability, which is a key word nowadays. So, can you share sort of what you're seeing across the board with your clients?
Yeah. So I think the first biggest change in kind of the past, 5-10 years, I think is probably this idea around expectation. And I imagine most of the kind of attendees today will feel this really acutely, which is people are looking for a lot more out of their benefits package, both from a sustainability angle, but in terms of optionality as well. I think we've moved away from this idea of a one size fits all approach, where you get your pension, your eye care vouchers, and maybe a bike scheme if you're lucky, right? And people now are expecting a lot more, and the market, I think, is really evolving to reflect that, with new employee benefits being added all the time, right through from menopause support, support with caring for the elderly, all things that people are now looking to their employer for support with, right? Which people just weren't doing 5-10 years ago. I think underpinning that is this idea of like personalization. People are expecting a different benefit or offer or suite of benefits based on their own needs as an individual, whether that's, you know, a Gen Z first entering the workplace, or whether that's somebody that has carer responsibilities or, you know, needs a car for their household. And a lot of pressure is being directed at HR to find solutions for that, right? And the underlying theme that we're seeing a lot of is that sustainability angle as well. So big job for HR, right? Because you've got, it needs to be simple, but it also needs to be really personalized, but it also needs to be sustainable. And all of those things, that's a really difficult balance to strike. And from a sustainability perspective, people want perks with purpose, right? They want their company to be offering perks and benefits that align with their own personal goals around sustainability. And that's where things like EV schemes come in. And then I think salary sacrifice being a mechanism to that is really, really important. It allows people to make a sustainable choice in a cheaper way. So probably my three things there, yeah, it's kind of sustainability remains really important, maybe more important than it did before. People want choice, but they don't want it to be difficult. So a tricky job for everyone on the call there.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, I think, and we started with sustainability, and I think we'll come on to it later on. Is, you know, about what it's kind of attraction piece as well. But yeah, no, I think that's quite spot on in terms of what you're seeing, and this personalization. Absolutely get that. You know, I think we're trying to, you know, everyone's got very different lifestyles, and we're trying to kind of work things that work for everyone instead of having a ranch of benefits perhaps that aren't even, you know, communicated well even. So. All right. And then, so in terms of, you know, let's turn to electric then. Obviously, electric vehicles was quite an interesting one. So what role do you think then electric car schemes are playing in employee engagement and retention strategies? Because it's a difficult market out there in terms of getting the talent, retaining the talent. So talk to us a little bit about that in terms of how you see them playing a part here.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of like a jokey thing I always say, which is like someone taking out a 3 or a 4 year lease on a car is a great way to show that they're not going anywhere in its most simple form. But I think more generally, you know, an employer can use an electric vehicle scheme very cleverly, right? It's no cost. It's not a way of them, you know, you don't have to spend a load of money and go to your financial director and say, oh, I need a big budget to put towards an engagement strategy. You know, you can implement something like an electric car scheme with to no cost to yourselves, right? You know, and I think lots of providers do this. What we do is we completely de-risk it as well to make sure that that's not a consideration or a concern for people. I think EV schemes as well actually appeal to a really broad range of people. So, you know, when I first started working in the space, there was a very definite electric vehicle driver profile, right? And I think probably the first company I worked in, we always used to joke that like our dream customer was, you know, a 47-year-old man that lived in Twickenham. And it's evolved a lot since then. And so I think having an electric car scheme on your books as a benefit is a great way to give any employee a signposting to a really cost-effective solution for them to commit to green travel. And probably the last thing on that from me is like when we're looking at this in the context of a total reward package, you know, electric vehicles are quite expensive bits of kit still. You know, the secondhand market is growing. You know, we have a lot of used cars available for people, but you still wouldn't necessarily be able to go to a dealership and get one in an affordable way. And so again, you know, it's a great way to show your employees that you value them by finding a solution for them to make a green choice in a more cheaper way. Yeah.
Okay. Let's run our first poll just on that. And before that, any questions, just please put them on the Q&A. So if anything's kind of, that's good. I'd like to kind of find out a little bit more. Please let's do the first poll. So normally we run these in teams, but they're a little bit more tricky at the moment. So what we're going to do to make sure that you can hopefully all take part is they'll pop a link in the chat, should come up in a moment for you. So you click on that, just pop your name in and then make your choice. Hopefully you only got to put it in once. So that should be there for you, which I think is, there you go. So I'll just read out the question whilst you're doing that. So which of the following best describes your organization's current benefits focus? So is it A, financial well-being, Is it B, health and well-being? Is it C, sustainability? Is it D, retention and engagement? So a lot of kind of key ones in there. If you can all vote now, and we'll share those results in a moment. Natalie, then I'm going to put you on the spot here, and let's see if you can just sort of guess what you think might be coming up top here.
I'd love it to be sustainability, selfishly, but I think probably in light of kind of recent stuff, financial well-being would be my guess.
Financial, okay. So right, so let's see if that's long enough to sort of see if we get any results here. So we'll have a look in the background. I think, I mean, they're all kind of hot ones, aren't they, at the moment? And obviously in a climate like we're in at the moment. Right, let's have a look. Can we share that one then, please, Bino? There we go. All right, so interesting. So there you go. That's so 63% health and well-being. 13% sustainability, which is pretty low, isn't it, at the moment, and 25% retention and engagement. So that might tweak and change, but that's kind of what we've got at the moment. So, okay, thoughts on that? Really, not quite where you wanted it to be.
It makes a lot of sense, though, right? Like, you know, when we've kind of had a change of government and lots of things going on, you know, that people are still looking for that, and there's lots of stuff going in the world at the moment.
Yeah, I think. Yeah. Hang on, what we got here? Let's see if we got a question coming in. No, it's fine. Okay. All right. Let's move on then. You said we've got a little question here. She said about risk, but there's not a certain amount of risk for employees in the first few months. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the point. You know, you talked about that kind of tying people in. So about risk. So is there a certain amount of risk for employers in the first few months? That's a question that's come in, which I think is relevant, isn't it?
Great question. So a lot of the market there is, right? So one thing to look out for with salary sacrifice schemes is punitive early exit charges, or quite strict requirements around, you know, what happens if a car comes back early. We identified that as an area that, you know, needed review. And so we have a package called like a complete employer protection package, where from day one, an employee is covered and an employer is then therefore de-risked. I think it basically enables them to be protected against major life events, dismissals and all that kind of stuff. And then there's kind of a feature that we enable in there where even if the money can't be recouped, we can also, you know, support the employers, and as long as due diligence has kind of happened to recoup that money or attempt to, like, we have a kind of protection in place for employers. What I would say is anybody that wants a bit of a deep dive into the risk provision, like, just reach out. We'll happily have 10 minutes just talking about it. There's also some, and I think might have a colleague on the call that can share some info in the chat about our risk provision for people to read at a later date.
Yeah, I mean, again, on the same lines, which I'll just make this is a bit clearer actually in a way, but what happens if employee leaves, goes on long-term sickness or maternity leave partway through the term of the lease, is if there is no salary for the sacrifice, who is responsible for the monthly payment? So I guess.
Yeah, I can't access the chat to pop a little link in, but in essence, I can quickly actually show people, why not? So this is how we structure it. So it enables people to, you can see here that the protection is kind of across multiple areas. So we're enabling people to be covered off on lots of eventualities there. And I can see that a colleague has put some more information in the chat. So yeah, we can definitely pick that up. Great question though.
Yeah, exactly, and it's key, isn't it? You know, if it is that kind of worry of a long-term kind of you know, benefit you kind of, I guess, caught with, or the cost of it. So okay, so let's move on to question 3. So are you seeing a kind of real, you know, uptake in the EV salary sacrifice scheme? I guess due to things like ESG and net zero targets, because, you know, are they having some sort of impact?
Definitely. I think people are suddenly very aware that it's not long until they're going to have to report on this. You know, people are very used to reporting on their kind of scope 1 and 2 emissions as a business. So, you know, the carbon that they're outputting through day-to-day business operations, you know, the efficiency of my office, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. but they will have to start reporting on associated expenditure. So, employee travel and all that kind of stuff as well, which is scope 3. So with that in mind, lots of people are going, oh, actually, I need to look at a car scheme that is going to be, reflective of our commitment to our internal sustainability goals that we've set as a business, but also the kind of governmental and wider aims that we need to achieve as well. Lots of feedback from employees is that employees don't want to be able, they don't want petrol and diesel cars, right? They're like, they're not particularly tax effective. The benefit in kind on them is so high that actually any salary sacrifice savings are basically eaten up by it. But also people want to be able to see electric vehicles on their kind of like menu of choices to be able to offer as well, which I think is then just increasing the kind of interest and uptake even more.
Okay. And then in terms of sort of misconceptions, because I guess there's a lot of grey area around here that people might feel. So what are kind of some of the common misconceptions about electric car benefit schemes? What do you get thrown at you?
So I always kind of break this down into a few areas. So one is kind of effort, right? People think these schemes are going to be super, super labor intensive. We do, and good providers will be able to integrate with any existing software you have. We'll have an employer portal that will make it really easy for you to access the information you need. We'll send you all this stuff digitally and be able to give you the information you need promptly, right? And I know that sounds really obvious, but I think actually sometimes that is something that's taken for granted a bit. So effort being one. Cost is another one. I think people assume that there are going to be charges. Businesses that have had more traditional fleets where they are paying maybe a service or administration charge to a big provider to run that fleet for them. So they think that's going to be something. And ultimately, these schemes, are cost neutral for businesses. And the last one is that point that we kind of touched on around risk to a business. I've had conversations with countless financial directors who are like, I don't want to be left holding a 13 grand baby at the end of this if an employee leaves, right? And so I think once you've kind of combated those three things head on, your business case to kind of implement a car scheme is kind of written for you, right? Some other things that kind of come up a lot are around the EVs themselves. We still have quite a lot of nervousness around them, battery anxiety, charge point availability. Yeah. Can I charge at home? What about my employees that don't have driveways? And so a really important part as well is that kind of wider education and journey to take your employees on at the same time, because what you don't want to do is launch a benefit and then no one take it up because they're worried that, they can't get a car that's going to cover the range that they need. So looking for a provider that gives you some really consultative support for your employees there is also really important.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting enough. I won't quite make your demographic you started with, but I have a petrol and an electric car. So I've gone through, all of those kind of things. And I know what you mean about kind of range anxiety. And so there's an educational sort of piece to do from the front end. Absolutely. And that support is key. I mean, it's a bit like any benefit, it's got to be communicated well, hasn't it? And often as not, it sometimes isn't. So that's quite key. Okay. Again, thank you for these questions so far. I hope we've answered them. I think we have, and obviously there's support material as well that we're sharing, and obviously after the webinar. So any other questions as we go, please do send them in, and I will put. Let's have a look at our second poll then, if we could. Again, in your chat, and I'll read out the question. Go at this one. So has your organization already introduced an electric car scheme? Pretty straightforward. This one, yes. A, B, planning to, C, considering it, or D, no plans. So just have a little go at that one, which gives us a bit of an idea of who we have with us today and what stage you're at, really. Natalie, I know what you'd like, but what are you going to go with?
I think I would say majority of people might be in B or C. Yeah. I think from my experience with these things, like people may have had a car scheme in place for a while that they're maybe looking at reviewing and going out and doing a marketplace review, and EV schemes being a big part of that. Those that say no plans, I'd love to understand why in the chat if people are feeling brave.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's have a little look at the results. We've got enough in the background. That'd be great. Put that one out. Here we go. Okay. Oh, there we go. Pretty good. So yeah, lots considering, and some with no plans. So okay, yeah. I mean, so it's obviously something that's resonating and being looked at, which is great, and obviously, and absolutely use this session to get any kind of those unsurety, anything you're unsure about, let's ask it and find out today. So on that note, what Natalie, what sort of internal hurdles or objections typically arise, I guess, and how can HR leaders address them to get this up and running?
It's a great question. I think the biggest one is time, isn't it? Right. I think if you think about an HR leader's any given day, you can start the day thinking, oh, amazing. I've got 2 hours to spend on that project that I really wanted to get off the ground for my electric vehicle car scheme, right? And then there will be a people issue. There will be something that needs addressing, that, all of those kind of daily things that come into the HR leader role. So I think probably the big one is making it fit in with other projects and everything you've got going on. And my advice there is look to your provider for support there. My team will happily help co-write business cases, right? They will, because it's, they'd love to, they want you to work with us. We're all interested in the same thing. They will sit down with you and say, what's going to make your kind of team, sign this off? How can we help? What information do you need? I think other ones is, it's a really saturated market. So I think there's lots of providers out there. Everyone claims to be the best, which is unhelpful, isn't it? Because you're but who is the best? So there's quite often will be a bit of due diligence that you will want to undertake, kind of like a marketplace review or a cost exercise. And so I really do encourage you to do that piece of work. But again, ask your providers for support on that. They will help. And so if you said to them, look, can you price me up 5 vehicles so I can compare them, so I can see who's got the most cost-effective scheme? Great. We have an open quote tool. So actually, if anybody is ever feeling nosy and wants to have a look at how much stuff costs, you can log onto the Electric Car Scheme website and have a look. Not everyone does that. A lot of providers keep stuff kind of behind closed doors, which makes it hard for HR to try and get the information they need, right? And I think probably the last internal hurdle would be around, getting that ultimate sign off, because, if you're busy, the other person who's got to sign it off is going to be busy as well. And so doing everything you can to really bring everybody on that journey with you from the beginning. What I tend to really encourage is you have your champion, who's the one that really wants to push this forward. But, have you got an in-company sustainability group who is also really interested to this, that can help you, right? You might be able to say to them, would you be able to dedicate an hour to some marketplace research for me, just to try and take some of those things off your plate, so that then by the time you're taking it to the director, whoever's going to sign off, you've already got a fully kind of baked proposal and it's ready just for a signature.
Yeah. So it's that kind of thorough kind of due diligence, getting that kind of your case fully kind of wrapped up, any questions kind of pre-answered, and then off you go. And I think as we've alluded at the front end, that there's a concern around that risk part, getting that cancelled out as well, isn't it? So okay, all right. Well, let's look at I mean, this one I think you touched on slightly, but I think it's more kind of interesting. So how can sort of such schemes be made inclusive and accessible across all employee levels? Now, I think this is quite interesting. So we're kind of looking at a little bit of equity here, and I think my second point, I guess, on this would be, and you again alluded to it, but challenges of where people live. Those living in homes that have no off-road parking for EV charging, concerns around that. So talk to me a little bit about that. How can employers kind of get that message across, and what's available really?
Yeah, and really important, right? Because again, you don't want to be seen to be putting in a benefit that's only for, your C-suite or your exec team, because that will be unpopular with the majority. And if you think about the majority of the workforce isn't the people earning that money, right? So you need a scheme or an initiative that's going to resonate with as many employees as possible. So there's a couple of things there, which is, one is around kind of cost and accessibility and salary, right? And I think this is the bit that probably is the hardest to navigate. because you have national minimum wage considerations and lots to unpack there and make sure you're mindful of. So the way that we combat that is we have a substantial second-hand EV proposition. At any one time, 300 or 400 EVs available. And some of those are very, very cheap, right? So I drive a second-hand MG4, and I think I pay about £206 a month for that. And that, you know, I think I get about 270 miles out of that. I'm a city driver, so admittedly I'm not doing big stints, but you know, I probably only have to charge it once a month, if that, right? So I think a used car proposition that unlocks your lower rate taxpayers is really important, because otherwise they'll just be a bit like, oh, well, we're making a big song and dance about a benefit that I can't do anything about. Yeah. I think you can also be very clever about how you position benefits. So where I've seen this done really, really well is when you're signposting a solution of travel benefits. So you could have something like Cycle Saver. They're an amazing organization. Check them out. One of my recommendations for everybody. They basically allow you to access things like Lime bikes through your salary. You obviously will have, most companies will have a cycle to work scheme. There will be loads of other initiatives that you can sit alongside a EV salary sacrifice to be showing, look, like these are all the solutions we have to help people with transport. That does help, because then you've kind of got a bit more optionality there for people who maybe don't earn enough to think about it. Look for a provider, as I said, that has secondhand cars. That is the only way you're going to get your people earning 30 grand in cars if they want them. If they don't have readily available supply of secondhand cars, don't go there. It's not going to be worth it, because people won't be able to access it. The other point you then have to your statement there around kind of, you know, wider access and situational variables. We know that location is a challenge, right? So it's all right for me sitting in South London. You know, I can walk down the road and I've got 8 chargers and they're cheap, right? Because I can plug it in overnight and then I can leave it there before I go to bed and pick it up in the morning and go off on my way, right? But in some areas, like where my parents live in kind of rural Kent, there is one public charge point for 4 villages. So what do you do then? And I think that's where we created a solution called the Charge Scheme, which basically enables people to salary sacrifice the cost of the energy going into their EV. It uses all of the same mechanics as a salary sacrifice that you'll be used to. And the contingency, is that it has to be a company car and that the driver signs a driver amendment agreement up front. That's what makes it HMRC compliant. We're finding that has unlocked a whole new kind of cohort of drivers for us. People are saving, you know, 40% on what they would be paying at a rapid charger. Some rapid chargers are more expensive than petrol pumps at the moment. So if you can bring that cost down through something like the Charge Scheme, we're the only ones that do it, by the way. So, you know, that's a great way to be able to support those people even more. Most providers will also be able to offer you a home charge point installation if you have a driveway. Obviously, the cheapest way to do it is a super whizzy overnight EV friendly tariff. There's loads of them on the market, you know, OVO, Octopus Go, all of those can make the cost of charging your car to full, you know, nominal. So all of that really helps, but obviously having a driveway. The last tip I would give is there are companies like Co-Charger that are worth looking at, where basically people can almost like Airbnb their charge point. So you might find that you can make friends with someone that lives down the road and you can charge using their home charger as well. So lots you can do to improve that access. Lots more that needs doing though. Don't get me wrong. I think like the kind of public infrastructure still needs work. You know, the level of cost at a off the M4 is ridiculous. It is way too expensive. But the secondhand market is definitely helping kind of improve that access.
Yeah. I mean, my experience is just on that note, actually, for everyone who's not got an electric vehicle is exactly that. I think, you know, for them, you know, you're pretty much, and I'm fortunate to have a driveway. I've got a home charger 90% of the time. If I'm honest, it's only on a long run that I will basically be charging it a stop off. So it's quite rare. And then equally, I guess companies equally with chargers on site if you're going in, and actually it's a pretty good incentive to get people back in the office, perhaps you could say. So that actually charging at the office, I guess you must, I guess, have schemes where you have chargers put in companies.
Yeah, and great point actually, because I wanted to talk about this. You've reminded me, so thank you.
That's right.
I've seen salary sacrifice schemes double in success for having workplace charging. I've worked with some massive tech companies that are UK based that will remain nameless in this webinar, and they brought everyone back to the office 4 or 5 days a week. It was hugely unpopular. They had to start running a bus service from the local town because so many people had relocated and were then having to get trains and then try and work out how to get to the office. And by putting in workplace charges, in the first year, their salary sacrifice car scheme doubled. And actually people were coming in. They were like, I can charge my car at work. They put a bit of an incentive behind it. You can make money from those charge points as well as an employer, which you can then offset against other things. So a whole other world to unpack there.
Yeah, I think so. When you say that, sorry, just touching on that, you can rent them out. You mean you can do it that way so that you can recoup costs.
I've seen it work quite well where it will be like free charging for the first 6 months to get everyone back in the office. And then after that it's subsidized, and then after that the driver would pay and the company would be able to take some of the margin. You can work directly with charge point operators to do that.
No, that's good. Interesting. That's good. All right. Okay. So obviously we've talked quite a bit about what some of the challenges and some of the kind of how to make it a bit equitable. So let's just kind of start to wrap this up a little bit. I know we're rapidly going through this like a fast charging car. So what does success look like when what is that overall success look like when implementing an electric car scheme? Just map that out for us.
Good question. And sorry, I get very excited and speak very quickly. So apologies to anyone that's thinking, what on earth are you talking about? So success is a really important metric for this. And I think with any benefit, you need to understand what you want to achieve from it. And where I've seen this work really well is when you set goals with your provider. So something I always encourage my customer success teams to do was be like, what is actually what do you guys want from this scheme, right? Like, why have you implemented it in the first place? Have you done it to get, tick a box and have something that you can put on a piece of paper and then not worry about? Most people say no to that, right? They've done it, they've gone to the effort, they want to do something with it. And so what's then really fun to start kind of designing is like, by the end of your first year, how many EVs do you want on your fleet, right? How many people do you want to have switched? How much carbon do you want your car scheme to have saved your business? How much national insurance do you want to have kind of saved, and all of those kind of things. And if you put a metric on it and you can link that back to your proposal, when we're talking about getting this signed off in the first place, and you can work with your provider to kind of set those objectives. And then what you can do is you can structure how you want your engagement with that benefit to look. And what we would do, for example, is test drive days, come on site, do some education sessions, turn up with charge cards to demo things. And we see that works really well. And actually, like with our own company scheme, obviously we always joke that everyone should have an EV because we're an EV business. But the reality is not everyone needs one, right? And I always say that I would rather someone was driving, a old petrol diesel car into the ground rather than getting a brand new EV, because it's actually better for the planet to do that, right? But if you do need a new car because your lease has expired or your situation has changed, getting a secondhand EV through Salsac is the best way to do it, right? And we found that just over 40% of our employees have leases at the moment. We've just hired probably about 50 new people in the past kind of 4 months. So I imagine that will continue to increase. And actually, in terms of what that looks like in emissions reductions, that's kind of like, over 8,500 kilograms of scope 3 carbon dioxide reductions. And so for us, that's an amazing metric to put to our board, to put in our impact stats. And what we do is we give our customers an impact report each year so that they've got that data as well.
Yeah. Okay. No. So I know we're coming on to actually measurement in a minute, but Yes, it's kind of like setting out a series of kind of targets that you're trying to hit here, that it basically aligns with kind of what you're trying to do for on a number of different areas, actually, like you say, against carbon footprint. Yes, good. Okay. And then let's move into our final poll then. Again, it will pop in your chat and I will read the question. So, what challenge you face when implementing new employee benefits? So is it A, budget constraints, B, lack of internal buy-in, C, communication and uptake, or D, complexity of administration? Might be more than one, but what? Just give us your top one, really, what you think is the major kind of challenge. Natalie, now obviously you've got some experience with this, I would have thought, in terms of your clients. But so what are you going for?
Oh, I feel like I'm being a devil for being like, oh, it's a combination of two. But I think, it's, I think for me, there's probably a combination between B and D, and the two things are really inextricably linked, right? Because if it is perceived as being really complicated to get off the ground and the ongoing administration is perceived to be really complex, no one's going to want to do it. And that internal buy-in piece is going to like naturally flow from that. That would be my hot take, but I'm happy to be challenged on that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's see from the results what we've got here. So they will come up on the screen in a moment. Because I think they're all kind of key. And again, but budgetary is quite an interesting one because it's kind of things are changing. There's obviously the climate's tough at the moment. Right, and 0. Well, maybe something's not worked there. Somehow it's not quite giving us a picture. Did everyone kind of get the? Oh, here we go. It's just delayed. Right, 50% is okay. So you said, what do you say? You said B and D. So B and D, pretty close. Yeah. So lack of internal buy-in is key at the moment. Is number one. Budget constraints number 2, and then the other two are split equally, really. So yeah, budget and what do you make of that? And well, all that they're still coming in. They're still coming in.
I think the buy-in thing's so interesting, isn't it? Because where I've been quite often, we will get reached out, and it'll be because my boss or the MD or so and so wants a car, and so quite often I think you get a bit of a challenge for an HR leader, right? Which is you've got lots of pressure and buy-in here at the top, but then where it can be really difficult is the people that will have to administer this as their day job are maybe the ones where they're like, oh God, like I really don't have the mental space to get this off the ground at the moment. So you've got the pressure coming from above, like I want a car, find a solution for me. My lease expires in September, so I need a scheme ready for then. And then you've kind of got the people around there being like, when do I fit this into my daily priorities? Is how I feel it from conversations I've had, but maybe that's just me.
I mean, obviously, budget again for the climate. I guess you're trying to sort of look at actually this can help everyone. Actually, it can be incredibly cost effective, isn't it? So, but equally, it's there are priorities perhaps elsewhere at the moment equally as well. So, I guess it's what's the strongest pull, isn't it? Sometimes. So. Okay. All right. So we move actually to our final question in a moment. So we're plenty of time. So if there are any questions, please do pop them on the Q&A from what we're talking about. If there's something we've not covered that you really still want to kind of get to the bottom of, please do ask those questions and we'll share them in a moment. So we talked about measurement, and obviously this is quite key. It is quite key for employers to be able to show, what something like a scheme like this. You need some ROI, don't you? Let's face it. So how are you measuring the impacts of salary sacrifice schemes on and a number of areas? I think employee engagement, I think, is key. Culture across your client base. You must have some sort of. Do you have any examples to share on those areas?
Yeah, I think this is a great question, and so there's probably a couple of things in here. So what we do and what most providers should be able to do, whether they will or not is a different question, is be able to give you very detailed driver level insights and their feedback, right? So what we do is, we collect CSAT scores or Trustpilot, across different parts of the customer journey. And if you're having a quarterly business review or, operational review with your provider about how the scheme's going, someone should come prepared with that information, and they should say to you, hi, just so you know, you've got 50 cars on the road. Of those, we haven't had any feedback, positive or negative, from these 10 people. We've had really positive feedback from these 20. And then, these couple have expressed concern or have had a challenge. And this is what we've done to fix it, right? And we have managed the complaint in this way. And it is a resolved complaint now, right? What you don't want as an HR leader is to be completely in the dark as to what's happening there. But you also don't want to be running around trying to fix those things yourself. And I think that's where some schemes go wrong, is that HR find out about something and then they're the one having to phone up a provider trying to fix it. That shouldn't be what happens, right? A good provider should turn up and be able to provide you with those insights on engagement and feedback, you should be able to request it of your provider, right? And then you've got that information that you can then take back to your annual benefits review with your team, and you can say, oh, actually, we've got a really positive engagement score for our EV benefit, but our engagement score for our pension provider, for example, is below what we need it to be. So actually, we're confident that our EV provider, that can just continue ticking over as it's doing. Let's keep doing what we're doing there, but we need a really targeted intervention on our pension provider, for example. So I think using that data and those insights alongside your kind of like impact and engagement data that your provider should be giving you as well. So a bit like I mentioned, those annual carbon impact reports and things like that. Another great measure is renewals. If someone has a good experience, they'll take a second car, right? Unless their situation really changes. So how many people are renewing their leases, taking out second ones, or taking out a lease for a family member? You can have a spousal car through a salary sacrifice scheme as long as you don't fall foul of national minimum wage. And you can also kind of be asking for feedback directly to your employees. And I think where I see these things work really well is when HR come with their data that they've got from their maybe annual benefit survey, and then the provider comes with their data insights, and just talk about them really openly and say, how is this working? Is there anything we can do better? Is there anything we can support you with? And then, that way you can kind of help do all of those other bits around engagement as well. You can do really targeted surveying in that, does the EV car scheme reflect your values personally, right? And if everyone says yes, you're like, great, we've put in a benefit that is aligned to people's personal values. So I think there's a lot you can do with data there.
Yeah, and you mentioned at the front end before this when we were talking about sort of target certain areas of target. So you help with some of those things like carbon footprint. You help with kind of showing what the savings have been, or so what can you tell us about some of those with a bit more detail? Yeah.
So for us, an employer can log into a portal which enables them to kind of administer their scheme in a really low admin way. But a secondary benefit of that portal is that we will showcase key stats like that. So, the kind of scope 3 emissions of that car being on the road with you, and you have that data, and then you can talk about kind of the scope 3 emissions associated with implementing a car scheme itself, and that information is available to you on a platform, which is super helpful.
Right, good. Okay, brilliant. All right. Any questions? Because we are probably going to finish a little bit early, which I'm sure is lovely for everyone sometimes. But we've never got enough time in the day, have we? So any questions before we sort of finish up, and then I'll just sort of wrap up. Please get them in. If there's something we haven't kind of covered, please do let me know soonest. But whilst you're thinking about that and getting any questions in, I'll just sort of wrap up a little bit more. Obviously, thank you for your questions that you sent in, and as I said, even if there's some afterwards, just pop them through to us, and we'll come back to you. I guess, Natalie, let's just do a little kind of wrap up then. So maybe a sum up to offer our audience today. Any key advice to kind of help put this scheme? What are the things to really just give you a top 3 or 4?
Yeah. So I think for me, the bits of advice are do your due diligence to make sure you're getting the right benefit or provider for your workplace's needs. So if you've got lots of, low rate taxpayers, you need a provider that's going to give you solutions for those people to support their access. So, doing that bit of due diligence. Secondly, working out who your champions are internally at the start of the process, whether that's a sustainability group, or someone in the executive team who wants a car on a certain deadline. Those people are going to really help you when it comes to kind of getting a scheme off the ground. And then lastly, like, you know, ask lots of questions of your provider and don't be afraid to get them to help you on your journey and your kind of ongoing reporting and monitoring of a scheme's success.
Okay, good. All right. Quick questions come in, which is good. So thank you again. Keep them coming in. So this one's really talking about hybrid cars. Many want hybrid cars. What's the reason for not including some low emission hybrids?
It's a great question, and it's actually something that we're exploring at the moment. So if hybrids are really important to you, have a conversation with our business development team, because they'll be able to give you a bit more detail on our kind of current stance there. In general, it links to benefit in kind again. So while not as punitive as benefit in kind rates on petrol and diesel cars, benefit in kind on a lot of hybrids is upwards of 17%, which then very suddenly again is kind of eating into the savings there. But it is an avenue we're exploring, because I think linking some of the points we discussed earlier around charge points, range anxiety, local infrastructure, we are kind of looking at that work at the moment as to whether we need to review having hybrids available.
Yeah, I guess hybrids is that itself. It's range, isn't it? It's kind of the worry, the anxiety part. And I guess, you know, equally electric cars have come on a long way. You know, I think when you start off, you know, some of these smaller ones, I think, you know, these city cars have less range in some cases, don't they? So, but some of them now 300, 400 miles, which is quite substantial.
Most people only drive 20 miles a day, Peter. Like, you know, I think people also need to have a think about their own driving habits.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's kind of how you drive your car, where you drive your car, how you use it, and how often do you actually do these longer journeys? And I think that's quite an interesting one. So there are times where if you're doing long journeys all the time, that could be a challenge, couldn't it? So it's very much about your driving style and habits. So, okay, any other questions? I don't. So I will kind of just wrap up a little bit, and any more questions come in, I will put them to Natalie. But listen. We hope you've provided some useful and practical approaches to enhancing employee engagement and retention by offering electric car schemes as part of your employees' benefits package. You know, I think it's clear you can support environmental values, reduce financial pressures on employees, and align with the broader ESG goals without placing undue burden on employers. So, my thanks today for Natalie for your excellent knowledge, insights, and experience. And also to Electric Car Scheme for partnering with us. For those of you who have joined us, we will send a recording afterwards so you can sort of recap. And if there's no further questions, thank you all for watching and taking part with the polls, and another webinar soon. So yes, thank you. And Natalie.
Thank you for having me. It was lovely.